hour. Jackson won't be with us today. He has some other activities going. We'll see how long or how good our connection runs. Let me immediately jump in and thank our wonderful patrons. Henril, Colton, Eric, Sarah, Zeshi, Travis Adams, Ian Chen, Convert Me, Stephen Early, Eat Meal, James Fitzwater, History Miner, Ralph McFadden, Paulogia, Ralph, Benjamin Simpson, Slava, Speed of Sound, Studio DM Wing, Command Cyborg, Doronku, Jelly, The Lavender Lady, Totus Real, Christopher Johnson, Antoine, Steve Bauman, Marigale, Beddoes, Daniel, Insects Are Cool, Nana, Morton Nielsen, Paul the Skeptic, Puffaluffagus, Bo Rasmussen, Devin Reeves, Alex Stone, Paul Williams, and our legacy patrons who I will continue to thank: Jen, Jody, Mike, John, Keith, Andrew, Dyer, Yui, Mona, Brad, Daniel, Staggle, Sun, Skystone, Ugly German Truths, Everett Bitsands, and Sarah Weisbaum. I could not keep a plugging away if I did not have all of your help to help out in many ways. I'm not getting any chat going yet. I don't know whether or not that's going to connect up or not, if I see it. Otherwise, I won't be able to react to anybody in the chat overlay if there's anybody out there. So we'll cross fingers and do what we can. I got the previous two episodes that I did over in Seattle updated in terms of the video descriptions and all the links in there. So any of you who didn't catch the last week's thing who are of a mind to do so, all of the links to the various technical papers and that I discussed are now up. So that's taken care of. It was a bit dicey getting onto the online over the last couple of days. Anyway, this week, of course, the perpetual job of dealing with Nathaniel Jensen, bless his heart, and the amazing Replacing Darwin, which is not amazing. It's been a complete washout in terms of technical information, but nonetheless, it is relevant to how creationists go about constructing their arguments. And so, since he doesn't have an index and doesn't have a bibliography, I'm constructing one. And eventually, in future, when we get a little bit more structured in terms of a dedicated website, I think the plan down the line will be to make of all those little files that I've done on Roop and Sanford, and also this book and any subsequent things I do where I'm constructing a reference bibliography like that, that those will be open access so everybody can gain access to them and use them as a field, so they don't have to go through the rigmarole of constructing a bibliography on their own solo. Let's make use of all of that. But anyway, we've got Jensen continuing with the notes about the biological diapause, which is the dormancy period in organisms. And he brings up the water fleas, an old 1996 paper, which fortunately there will be a linkage on. It's interesting that he would bring this up, because all he was dealing with was in terms of trying to argue that the mutation rates might somehow undermine evolution if he could get the mutation rates going in the right context to fit his model. But if he's going to bring up diapause in water fleas, isn't there work on what it means? And the fact that there apparently is a natural selection pressure for diapause relating to predators and a variety of other factors. And there's been a considerable amount of technical literature, including the paper he just cited. So I'll be putting some linkages to a couple of 2016 papers. One, which related to the phenotypes that occur in that genus in relation to predators, and that there are several works that have been experimentally tweaking those parameters in terms of what's biting what and what isn't, as to why the forms take the forms they do. One is from 2016 by Herzog, which means that theoretically Jensen could have known about it, and work has continued since. There's a 2021 paper just out, which is also about the experimental aspect. Now, it looks like the genetics of what is underlying diapause is not entirely well known yet in any organism. If somebody knows a counterexample, let me know. But anyway, it didn't look like that there was any great allusion to which genes are actually clicking on and off in that phenomenon. But eventually they're going to track it down and figure it all out. It may not be a terribly easy thing to do in terms of figuring out what does what, especially with little itty bitty organisms and that. But anyone want to make book as to how likely it is that any of the people who do that work will be creationists? I'm suspecting no, but we'll find out. Clearly, Jensen, in relying on a paper that was over 20 years old when he cited it and paying no attention whatsoever to the work that had been following since, suggests that no, they're not going to be doing that much. Part two, and again, we'll see, because the cycling has been running up and down and up and down and up and down. And again, the connection apparently is a little bit dicey enough that I'm not getting the live chat if there's anybody in there. Otherwise, I will be putting a little on that. We're hoping that we get the chat. Anyway, CMI, our Creation Ministry National, which is the other half of the old Answers in Genesis, that got split up in the divorce, what, 2005, somewhere around in there. They tried out a link just last month to an old 2000 Carl Wieland post, which tries to tar our nasty old Darwin guy with evolutionary thinking about depression. That supposedly being depressed or even suicidal is all due to selection pressure to get rid of inferior people, and that this is part somehow of evolutionary thinking. And Wieland's source for this, yeah, it ain't no technical paper. I'll be putting the link up to the thing. It turns out to be an offhand remark in a guy who apparently suffers from depression down in Australia, who was being interviewed for a program on this on Australian radio in 2000. And along the way, he just happened to say, I think that some people may have an inability to cope, and maybe this might sound a bit extreme, but that might be Darwinian theory, the Darwin theory of survival of the fittest. Maybe some of us aren't meant to survive. Maybe some of us are meant to kill ourselves, because the only people that really suffer are the ones behind, but the person who kills himself may in fact be liberated from this body, which is a philosophy that the kid might offer, but based on what understanding of Darwinian philosophy? So since Wieland never bothered to look into it, I thought, and the fact that CMI, in reposting the thing in the present world, 2021, didn't think to look into it, I'd look into it. There's an awful lot of technical literature on a variety of neurobiological things relating to states of mind and their possible evolutionary relationships. I didn't have anything prior to this on the evolutionary aspects of depression, but as it turns out, there's quite a lot on it. So now I've added those to my things, and fortunately, we'll be able to put links up to virtually all of them. There's an old 2008 paper on depression in an evolutionary context from Lewis Wolpert. His position is that sadness and low levels of depression are adaptive, since they lead to the individual to try and make up a loss. By contrast, severe or clinical depression is not adaptive, but can be thought of as sadness having become malignant. So not that people are supposed to be weeded out by Darwinian selection, apparently. So strike one against Wieland's hypothesis. Next paper from 2009, Andrews and Thompson, The Bright Side of Being Blue, Depression as an Adaptation for Analyzing Complex Problems. Their hypothesis is that depression is an adaptation that evolved as a response to complex problems, and its function is to minimize disruption of rumination and sustain analysis of complex problems. It accomplishes this by giving episode-related problems priority access to limited processing resources, by reducing the desire to engage in distractive activities, like being with other people, and by producing psychomotor changes that reduce exposure to distracting stimuli. So that they are arguing then that there is a positive value having nothing whatsoever to do with extinction of people as inferior. So strike two for nobody evolutionary community, what Wieland claimed it was based on an old radio report. Next one was a 2011 review in the Canadian Journal of Psychiatry, Evolutionary Theories of Depression, a Critical Review, which I thought was particularly useful because he would literally, and he's one of the various proponents of one of the hypotheses, he goes through all the different competing points of view as to what there might be an evolutionary relationship to depression, none of which involves a Darwinian selection for inferior people going extinct. Strike three. Strike four, a 2017 paper from Galecki and Talarowska in the Medical Science Monitor, The Evolutionary Theory of Depression. They're talking about a yin-yang kind of balancing act, that things that might have a positive aspect also can have a negative one. So it's much more in the realm of a spandrel. And that depression is kind of an unintended side product of an evolutionarily active brain. Also not claiming that inferior people are being disposed of on this. So Wieland's argument, we'll put all the material as well, I think, in the discussion of the exaggerations about evolution that will be in one of the chapters on human evolution in the new book with Jackson. So you'll get the references there, but they'll also be, I'll be able to put them in the description in here. So it bears in mind yet again, first, how Wieland's argument in 2000 was bad to begin with. He offered no actual evidence that any Darwinian thought what he was accusing them of. So it was entirely a secondary pot shot. Two, that CMI thought that they could reprise this decades later and not even think about looking into any of the science literature. And three, ta-da, thanks to the internet, we can find this information really, 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 really fast and determine that they, in fact, don't know what they're talking about. It should remind absolutely everybody that everybody can play this game, and everybody out there who's watching the show or that you talk to, and say, hey, RJ's got the secret tool kit, the Swiss Army knife. Have an area that you're interested in, read up on it, and if you encounter somebody making stupid statements, fact check them, just like I've been doing here. Follow through on it. You'll learn more about it. Tell people about it. Do a posting on it. Start on your own channel, however you want to work at it. But the main point is to make the information available. And it's interesting that even though I keep track of neuroscience work on the biological underpinnings of our behavior in conjunction with doing the creation evolution research, it's interesting that this particular topic hadn't popped up on my scope. That thanks to CMI, I've actually done now some more research on the subject and now know more about what's going on, and it's not helping the creationist case on that. Unfortunately, I'm still not seeing our little chat overview in here. Let me see if I fiddle with the button at all to see whether or not it might recheck, but it's looking like not wanting to do that. The cycling seems to be going forth fairly well, between like 50% and more on the channel. So hopefully there's no problems with the audio on there. We may cut it short because I'm not getting any feedback. I can't see what's going on in there. And rather than just simply operating as an idiotic talking head for a whole hour or a half hour or however much we would stay on the air, but not getting any feedback with the audience, it may not be working all that well. I'm now back from the holiday. We are busy catching up with our various material. I've been managed to replenish my ink supply, busily downloading material that relates to stuff in conjunction to the new book. And so we're happy-go-lucky with all of our little projects. That keeps the old RJ busy, in addition to shoveling the walk. We've been getting little spurts of snow periodically, fortunately, in relatively light dosages of just a couple inches, and it's been powdery pretty much, which is way easier to shovel than the stuff that gets to be wet and clumpy. So we've all been in the very, very cold category of under freezing. And in fact, when I got in from Seattle, it was like 15 degrees through most of the trip. Fortunately, the passage across Snoqualmie Pass was the best opportunity. If I had tried to come a couple days later, I probably wouldn't have been able to make it because it would have required snow tires, chains and all that. So we were lucky, got back home, and I was able to drive into my driveway even because there hadn't been a huge amount of snow accumulation, which I had been worried about that there might be. I have augured a car up on a high snow berm before, to where I literally got stuck trying to get into my own driveway, but fortunately that didn't happen. So we'll keep busy with our little projects. I would be chit-chatting with everybody in the audience if I could see anybody, so I've absolutely no idea if anybody's out there watching. We've got in about a 15-minute thing. We've got all of our material organized for the papers, and everybody that is watching the show, let everybody know about what I'm up to. Let everybody know about the books. Shameless plug. The Rocks Were There and Evolution Slam Dunk, and we'll have Rocks for There Volume 2 hopefully out sometime during the 2022. I'm also trying to finish up the second Paralogs of Fog novel. Got about 4 chapters to go. And 34, 35, 36, yeah, 4 chapters to go. And get that out of the way. So we keep busy on this stuff. Follow the methodology approach. I've been keeping track of people making weird claims about COVID because that's going to be a topic for a future work with Jackson on conspiracy thinking. It spills over into the political science area and there's a material on religion and its political and cultural backgrounds, and there's a ton of stuff to deal with. So we've got oodles and oodles of wonderful material, which will probably end up being books as bulky as those two little puppies in there. And there's Paralogs of Fog up there. So let everybody know about the project. If they can squeak away and help with the Patreon, the more the merrier on that front. And I mean, it's even if it's just like a $1 Patreon, but regularly, that helps. So everybody get into the field if you think my work is valuable enough, and follow it up in your own life in terms of how you approach matters. Take everything as a source methods issue. As Erica and Jackson and Apologia and all the others know, that when I watch their programs, and they are wonderful, delicious programs to do, I'm also fact-checking them along the way. If they mention technical papers, I'm looking them up. And because they're sound scholars, I know that I'm reasonably confident and hardly surprised to discover that the papers say exactly what they say it does, and that they are not bypassing relevant information. In fact, that they're very careful about looking at all the different sides of everything. And you'll find that illegitimate thinkers and ideologues won't be doing that. And that the odds are, the more egregious or outrageous the claim is, if they go to the trouble of offering a source citation, the odds are it won't say what they claim it does. So in other words, the source will exist. It'll be a real thing. Don't be necessarily deterred. They've cited a technical paper and it actually exists. Well, download and read it. And you can find out, as Dan Stern Cardinale points out in various things that he's done at his anti-creation talks, Creation Matters, he would remind everybody that in a technical paper, when you're reading a science paper, the abstract is useful, but go to the conclusion section. That's where often the meat of the thing is. And the abstract will be a summary, a distilled summary, but an awful lot of the interesting aspects are going to be popping up in that conclusion section, which typically is ahead of the methods and notes in most typical science papers. You get into a little different operation if you're dealing with stuff that's written in on historical topics and cultural history and other things. They all have their own conventions. Legal papers have their own little conventions. So all you have to learn is the trick of the trade of where the relevant information is popping up, and that can speed up the process. Anyway, since the chat overlay is going nowhere, and it's a nice cold day here, and I put all the information in about what we're basically talking about, and thanked all of our wonderful patrons, this will be a short show. I've been able to get feedback from people in the audience. If there are people in the audience, I would be happy to be discussing stuff and riffing off of whatever stuff is going on in there, but I'm not getting anything. It's the little spinny circle is just going around and around and around on the chat overlay. So I haven't had any breakdowns in the stream, so we should count ourselves lucky on that. Once it gets posted, I'll be putting all of that stuff up, and we'll see you next week. Everybody stay safe. I've been boosted. If you haven't got your booster shot, check out. There should be more and more opportunities. Check online. If in Washington State, we have a website and stuff that locates all of that. I found a spot. One was very close, but booked up into January, but another branch of that same operation had a reservation easily available, and it was only like 5 minutes drive away. So make use of any of the opportunities you are, unless you live in wackaloon states that have nutballs that are trying to discourage you from behaving rationally. Behave rationally, and then kind of hunker down and don't bump into the ones that aren't behaving rationally, because they're a hindrance to you. So anyway, we'll see you all next week, and hopefully we'll be able to see a chat overlay and we can say hi to everybody. I don't know, Lavender Lady, are you in there? Beej and all the others who might be on the field that check the show live typically, as opposed to watching it later on. If you're there, sorry, I would have loved to have seen you and say hi and all of that. So bye, and we'll see you next week.